When I look at our history, I realize that our history is not negotiable. It's not defined by slavery. It is a profound history, and we need to teach it in honesty. Forgot to add myself to the stage. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everybody, to the Erudition Network. It's the Erudition Network's Black History and Knowledge session that we do on Saturdays. I want to say welcome to all of you. This is our Erudition Network Black History Interactive, where we dive into history and we start to look at things and go into history that is not often shared. Tonight, because I don't want to waste too much time, we're going to deep dive. And we're going to, we've been doing some things over the last couple of weeks, but we're going to handle a deep issue here tonight, right? We're going to deep dive into what happens when people, cultures, countries, people in power try to erase, distort, revision, hide Black history. You know, right now, we are living in some times that are cyclical, but extraordinary, right? A period where people are telling us what we should learn from history. Some are calling it the Trump era due to the president, but it is a war on history. We come on, or I come on every week to teach Black history, right? And to provide you with information, facts, and knowledge. But across this country, across this world, certain people in power are attempting to vet, right? To parse our history and hide facts. They are people in power who have the ability to shape our school curricula, to display or even whitewash the history of the Black experience throughout the world. So I want to make a point to you all tonight as we go into this, that this isn't just a Black issue. This isn't just an American issue. This is an entire humanity issue where we hide our history, our shared history, which is highly rooted in Black history. So tonight, we're going to explore that question in depth. We're going to go into this because we need to. Black history spans the entirety of humanity, from the cradle of man to where we are now. And so we're going to link the past, the present, look at the struggles, as we always do. We're going to look at, because a lot of people like to go there, but we have to touch on it a bit, the legacy of slavery, of Jim Crow, the civil rights movement, and even in today's battles, you know, in our classrooms, in our lessons. But we won't try to pander. I'm not here to pander. I'm here to provide you facts. So sometimes your feelings may get hurt with some of the things that you may hear, some of the things that may be said. But the truth of the matter is, we have to cover these things. We're going to highlight our heroes. We're going to talk about the stories and the contributions that have been forgotten, that have been forbidden, and have been hidden. And these histories, why they are so important to us, and why so many want them to remain untold. Untold. All right, everybody, let's get into this. By the end of this session, I'm going to tell you all something for you new viewers, people who let me say also, thank you to all of the new viewers, all of the subscribers, everyone who has pushed this channel over the last a few weeks. I really appreciate it. I greatly appreciate it. And I want you to be able to come here and get facts and knowledge and understanding. I also want you to understand that this is an interactive program, so please feel free to put your questions in the chat. If you are on Facebook and we don't see it, as I tell you every week, make your way on over to YouTube. If you haven't subscribed, push that subscribe button, push that bell so you can get notified when we're dropping new episodes, and join us here. Join us here on Saturday and on Monday when my wife is on for Adroit Living. Now, I want to make sure that you understand that the struggle over histories, curricula, and what we are being taught are part of a long tug and war, a tug that has been going on for a very long time. People have been trying to distort, to revision, to take away our history for centuries. And so I want to hear from you if you're joining us. I know we don't have a lot of people on right now. Typically, they tend to come in a little bit late, but I've started to not hesitate on the lesson, because you can always catch up on the recording. And as many of you know, because I have answered your comments, I will answer your comments. I will talk to you, and I will go in and we can uncover the history together. However, before I dive in tonight, because it is relevant to our history today, I want to share with you my book. If you haven't gotten this book, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Lulu Books, right? But before we dive in, I want to give a quick shout out to this, because we're talking about history. And this episode of what we're talking about, this is an important book. It's my latest book. I'm working on 2 more, but the Erudition Network presents 101 Black History Question Challenge. Here's the thing. If you go on Amazon or Lulu Books and you get the interactive book, which I priced significantly cheaper than the print copy, you will find a treasure trove of knowledge. You will have questions in there that you can try to answer, get them wrong, get hints, go back, and then get all of this factual reference knowledge about all African and Black history from the beginning of time. It quizzes you on ancient cultures, their impact on history, not just Black history, from the kingdom of Kush to the people of the Indus Valley. You'll get all of that. And some of the references that are in that book are some of the things we're going to be talking about tonight. So I tell you, if you enjoy this program, please remember to go out and get that book. That's something that you can have with you. It is interactive. You can put it on your phone. You can put it on your television. You can stream it and use it as a game night for your family. It is an important book, and it has a relevance to what we're doing here and what we're talking about here. And I would be wrong to just plug that book and not mention, and I don't typically do this, but and not mention my wife's book. It's an extraordinary book also, that will help you to understand a lot. And so I want to share that before we get into this lesson tonight, because I want you all to gain from knowledge, right? I want you to learn, and I want you to benefit from what we have learned. So while you're building your historical knowledge with the Erudition Network, it's 101, while you get that book and watch us, I want you to go out there and get Generational Wealth, Information Asymmetry, and Your Success. What this book does is it gives you a breakdown of how unequal access to knowledge can shape your emotions, your psychology, your financial success, and how it is done in across generations, and how you can break that cycle. This is a book that I think all of us should have. It needs to be in our library if you're serious about closing the wealth and knowledge gap. So go on Amazon, get those 2 books, and do yourself a favor and learn. But all right, enough of the shameless plugging of these books. But I really did want to do that tonight because we don't typically do it. And when I show you all the books, it's usually very quickly and we're going off the air. But I wanted to give time at the beginning. All right, let's get into this lesson here. And you will notice that I titled this tonight, Why They Fear Our History. Why they fear it. Teaching Black history facts in the era of Trump. I went back and forth with that title. Is it salacious? But it's true. To understand why this is a topic that we should talk about, let's talk about what's happening right now. In the year 2025, we're seeing an effort to censor or spin the teaching of Black history in America. We're seeing things to remove stuff from museums, to remove things from books and curricula in certain states because it would hurt feelings. And when our current president began his term in January 2025, he has, from day one, he has openly attacked the history that is taught. He has called it woke. He's called it all these things. He issued an executive order titled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. And from that title, it is to say that American history that our kids have been taught that is inclusive is a lie. And ignoring the fact of the generations before that have been taught history that were definitely lies. And some credible historians, and of course civil rights groups, have argued that this is wrong. The order advances the idea of discrediting, of putting in pseudoscience, pseudo ideas that have been disproven. And in order to push it, they've threatened the funding of institutions, museums, research groups, because they say that they want to preserve and steward, in other words, vet our history. So the influence is strong, and it's being seen in, as I said, our museums, our national parks, our schools. They're telling a version of history that is whitewashed, sanitized, glossed over, and ignores the contribution of people of color. If I were to give you a concrete example of that, it was reported that the National Park Service had begun scrubbing information from its exhibits in areas in which Harriet Tubman and others transited for the Underground Railroad. They want to hide areas that are significant to Black people that some of their ancestors went through to get to freedom from oppression. It is one of the most heroic stories in history, not just Black history, of resilience, of running away from oppression, of fighting oppression, and they're editing it out in our park services. And every time it's discovered, somebody whistleblows or says, they say, oh, we weren't trying to erase it. We were just trying to vet it. People will go to these parks and places where they could learn to really understand physically, visually, and be aware tactically or tactily where these slaves had to go through is being erased. They pull back on it, but if you take your attention off of them, they go right back to it. Ask yourself, if you took your kids to a museum and suddenly figures who you know should be there are erased, figures like Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and so on, how does that affect your knowledge or your children's knowledge of history? How does that affect the American or worldwide understanding of Black history? Share your thoughts on that. Ask yourself that question, because that's what's being done. But sadly, that's not it. They also targeted the National Museum of African American History and Culture. They accused the museum because it showed slavery and civil rights and the struggle of Black Americans. He said it was divisive. This museum was constructed and it took years to tell the story of African Americans and to allow people to understand the painful chapters in this country that have affected us, but also to share the triumphs of those who stood against it, who fought against it. But in this era, it has been singled out as a negative, as a divisive thing. The museum's director resigned in protest because he would not truncate history. People in the Smithsonian system called this order a blatant attempt to stifle knowledge and history of Black people. But the administration and the people in power didn't care. Even the Institute and the Museum of Library Services, which is a federal agency, right, that's supposed to help fund libraries and museums, when they disagreed, they cut their staff. They cut their staff. They let people go. They funded, they cut off research projects. And this is not something new. This is a pattern, as I said, that has happened in America every now and again, because we don't learn, we're faced with these things. The actions continue in this era. And as you look between, I'd say 2015 all the way to right now, this era of leadership has rallied against educators, told them that they can't teach African American history or American history of racism. They banned federal diversity training that they called divisive concepts or woke. Anything that is taught that might suggest that Black people rose above a systemic racist system or continue to rise above a systemic racist system, they fight. Their catchphrase was CRT, the 1619 Project, and on. And in order to fight what they thought was revision of the 1619 Project, they created something called the 1776 Commission to promote a patriotic education. It's whitewashing. It's revision. It's an Archibald Dunning. If you don't know who Archibald Dunning was, Archibald Dunning was an educator after the Civil War who taught this idea of the revisionist Southern American history and taught many professors who went to the Dunning School of Thought. And in the early 1900s, from the late 1800s, early 1900s, they taught a revision system that said slavery wasn't so bad. The South was a lost cause. The founding fathers had to allow slavery. The Civil War was not fought because of slavery, it was fought because of states' rights. All of these lies that tell us to paint a picture that America's past was rosier than what we know it to be. Minimizing the atrocities, the slavery, the segregation, the Jim Crow, the redlining, and either ignoring or putting a shine on very severe topics. You got to ask yourself, if you know anything about history, what does that remind you of? For the 8 or 9 people that I have on tonight, give me a historical thing that this reminds you of. What I just told you, give me something within the current strain of history or even ancient history that this reminds you of. I'll give you a moment for that. Because you got to connect history and understand the cyclical function of it. And how, when you don't address a thing, it repeats. It continues. It doesn't die. It returns. The elders used to tell us, if you don't, you're going to repeat it. So I want to know what you think about that. What you think about that tonight. How that affects you. How any thoughts? Come on, it's 7, 8 of y'all up in here. We're not empty tonight. Give me your thoughts. All right. So if y'all don't have nothing, if you don't have nothing, it's propaganda. It's fascist. It's Nazi-ish. It should remind you of the book burning and the things that the Nazis did. This is not what we should be promoting. It reminds you of the slave Bibles and all of these things because it's real. Jabal Tariq, what do you have? I have mixed emotions about the topic under discussion. I am sympathetic to a lot of history that was said, but I understand why the current administration must do what it's doing. Well, I don't. And hopefully tonight you will understand why it is problematic, but I do appreciate your input. And then you're being honest about your mixed emotions with it. You know, the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund, immediately once Trump started to, in this era, put out these executive orders, the Legal Defense Fund, which is historic because it's the same legal defense fund that, historically fought against, Brown versus Board of Education and all of this, said it echoes the indoctrination schemes of some of the darkest chapters in human history. Post-Civil War, Reconstruction, we saw it. Of course, I just mentioned Nazi Germany. But that's a strong statement, and it's a strong fact to consider. When a government starts dictating what version of facts can and cannot be taught, to replace them with false revision versions, there should be alarm bells. Because when you hide our history, it prevents us from understanding and addressing what we're facing currently. We don't have a reference. It also diminishes accomplishments to young people who don't have folks to look to compare to their current struggles. This is a problem. Erasing history has been proven to shape nations. That what you don't know, you will repeat. People have this idea of saying truths. You will notice I rarely say truths. Facts. Because facts are stubborn. And if we don't give facts, how can we learn? How can we fix the problems that persist? How can we not get caught up in the rhetoric and the propaganda? Jabal Tariq. Black history professors pointed out several historical inaccuracies. Yes, I'm very much aware of the inaccuracies, and you can go back and watch earlier videos on my take on the 1619 project. And one of the reasons why I spoke earlier about my book is because one of the things that I am key to, for all of you who've watched us for a while and those of you are facts. Facts are stubborn things, and I'm going to make sure, as painful as they are, that you're going to get the facts. I'm not going to just give you things off the top of my head. This is not a TikTok public historian. This is not someone who's just this. I study, I read, and I reference everything that I do. And the problem that happens is once you tell a lie or a fallacy, you completely remove your credibility. And in an era where we are looking at people who are revisioning, and we have to ask ourselves the questions, why would anyone want to censor specifically Black history or downplay racism? Why would you want kids to know that or to be taught that? And then to say it's an issue of national pride. What pride? If you tell me that the idea of learning about slavery, Jim Crow, the civil rights era might make some students, particularly those students who are white, feel guilty or uncomfortable, why didn't you care about that same situation when, as a child, as I can go from my own personal experience, that when I open up a book and the first time I see someone who looks like me, they're in chains. If people don't understand how racism has been built into laws, religion, policies, institutions, governments for centuries, if they don't understand it, they're not going to demand any kind of change because they don't know to demand it. By obscuring history, right? You deny people access to role models who resisted earlier oppression. Earlier, I talked about Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad, removing the understanding of that in national parks. If you don't know those stories, or you're giving a American revision version of it, you don't understand the depth of that. How many died on the way? How many didn't make it? You won't realize that change is possible, that you can fight against oppression. You remove the understanding of what it means to fight. And I see all of your stuff here. You said Black feminists were embedded LGBTQ. Here's the thing. I do not support any revision or propaganda. But here's the thing about propaganda. You won't be able to understand it, right? If you never study. You will follow anything because you won't have any reference context. So when you tell me all of these things that you're saying about Black feminists who are better than LGBTQ, right? All these things. And what did you say here? I have no doubt you have studied a lot more than I have, and you may have forgotten more history than I would ever learn. I just added my 2 cents worth as a layman. No, that's fine. That's what we want. I want you to add your input. But I will tell you, we got to learn. Ask yourself, and I want to know all you out there. Sean Anthony, I see you. Thank you for joining us. I know you're out. Oh, it's my youngest son's birthday. I want to say happy birthday to my youngest, Matthew. I did not say that at the beginning of the program. He's out right now getting the cake. I would be with him, but I'm doing the show for you all tonight. But I'm just happy that God has allowed my son to see another birthday. So God bless. We got to ask ourselves, is there a connection between knowing history today, right? Knowing what's happened in the past and being able to tackle today's injustices? We know that there is a connection because people in power don't want us to see the connection. They don't want us to know the struggles that we've actually overcome. And so what's happening is the actions of people in power is significant. We're seeing protests of people saying, no, tell the truth. We're seeing people now trying to teach outside of classrooms. We have teachers under threat of going to jail who are resigning, ladies and gentlemen, in certain states in the country. And here's the thing. That's why I do this show every week. The government, the schools, they are not the only place where we can teach. It's not the only place we can teach. And here's the other thing. It's also the federal government and other places. Good to see you, Teddy. Yes, you had a YouTube issue, couldn't sign in. Well, I'm glad you're here. It's a lot of attacks in multiple places. In some states, political leaders have been pushing laws and policies, right? They've been restricting teachers, like I said, putting them in jail. They've been saying that racism, or even slavery is not something we should teach. They gave it the tagline, CRT, critical race theory. They threw it around in the news over and over again. Even when asked, they could not even understand what it meant. And I understand that critical race theory is an academic framework. It's taught in law schools. And what is teaching is to teach the lawyers, the people who want to be lawyers, or that there is a history of systemic racism. But for political purposes, the term was applied to every school. It was applied to every level of school, from K-12, kindergarten, and it was a catch-all, right? Let's just throw that out there. That was the first one. And when they started to do that, it gave politicians the ability to go start reading, writing laws. And so since 2021, 44 states have stepped in to limit how teachers discuss Racism and the History of Racism in America, Ed Topics. And 20 of those states have actually put bans and restrictions on certain books that can be read or shared in the school. These are facts. It's not just Florida. It's not just Texas. The entire country is going through this idea of revisionism. But we focus on only so many of them, like Florida. Ron DeSantis has done an atrocity, in my opinion, to what we should be teaching with his Stop Woke Act. You can't even learn about Negro Fort in Florida and how President Andrew Jackson, before he was president, blew up a sovereign fort owned by the Spanish that kicked off the Seminole Wars, but gave him a reputation that allowed him later to become president of the United States. He killed men, women, and children with a bomb. But you can't learn, and that's in Florida. Before Florida was actually given over to America. It prevents teaching history like that, which is important. It has stopped an honest discussion of history and how we can get beyond that. It has opened up the floodgate for lunacy by telling you that students feel bad learning about segregation. Students feel bad learning about slavery, but didn't quite remove all of slavery. Just tried to make it that slavery wasn't as brutal as you were led to believe. The Florida State Board of Education approved new African American study standards for K-12 that, it's hard to say, that included an open discussion or interpretation of slavery. It put into the actual study that enslaved Black people actually benefited from slavery. And that it wasn't all bad. That's in there, and we've seen it. Not as a debate, but as an actual stated fact. This is what they put in there. And even though there was national outrage from educators, historians, and they didn't stop. Because it was for them to say, well, slavery, as bad as you may have think it is, these people, they didn't have these skills before. And it takes away from the people of the Oba people and the Nok people who were metal workers. It takes away from the knowledge that you got from Timbuktu. It takes away from the knowledge that Africans brought over here with them, that I discuss in my book. It pretends that Africans came over here as a blank slate, didn't know anything. But we know that they took, we know from the Portuguese records that they took people who they knew either could make the journey or would have skills that would be beneficial that slave auctioneers could sell. And it didn't matter that Florida's teachers unions and everybody fought against it, because here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, the idea was to push this rhetoric and this foolery And again, not equip our kids with the tools that they need to vet propaganda. That's a problem. It's a major issue. I got to ask you all, how do you feel about that? Well, you gave us your thoughts. How do you feel about that? Do you think it's absurd? Do you think that it's going to hurt generations? How do you feel about it? What's your thoughts on it? I want you to remember this is an interactive program, and I want your thoughts on what is going on with this. Because quite honestly, we're suffering. We're suffering. We are not in a good place. And we could do better, but we're not in a good place. We deserve the full truth. They are downplaying Darius Burr. They are downplaying slavery in school systems through programs like, yes, PragerU and different places where they're attacking. And this is why it's so important to get online now and for us to do things like this, to actually discuss our history and to provide our history, right? Because if we don't do that, sorry for a moment. Then we're just going to fall into these traps. This idea of skills, because I got to address that. Because I saw a thing on PragerU too. It is not only that it is morally wrong to suggest this, it's historically false, like I said. There are people who came over here with skills. They look for people who were more educated, more skilled, who knew about plants, who knew about metal. They didn't teach these people to be great blacksmiths or farmers. They stole blacksmiths and farmers. And we know from the history that they exploited them. They took them and they exploited them. And to show you the facts of that, Africans changed the diet of the European. They improved on their music, their food, the way they use plants, the way they tame their animals. But if you look at it as saying, oh, they were taught this as they got over here, right? Then you're going to fall into foolery. We should not be teaching our children that the genocide, yes, the genocide of slavery, because they killed a lot, more than what is recorded, was beneficial. It is not beneficial. But this is what is being taught. And it's not just Florida, Jabal. It's not just Florida. I'm less concerned, as you said, about the politicians in Florida because those things change. I am concerned with Hollywood's propaganda machine that's detrimental influence. Now, I've talked about this before many times, but propaganda goes many ways. You can be concerned. Let me give you an example as a screenwriter. Spent time in screenwriting. I used to ask myself, why is it that Black screenwriters still write stereotypes and tropes? And then I had to understand, going to film school, I had to learn, because that's what they're taught. When you're taught to write a certain way, to think a certain way, conditioned to think that way. Not all of us have the agency to get out of that. And it begins early. If I'm teaching you from kindergarten that George Washington, or Thomas Jefferson, more importantly, was a good person, founding father, honorable person, but I don't teach you that he had horrible thoughts about Black people's intelligence. And then people say, well, he's a man of his time. But there were men of his time who didn't think that way. The reason why you say they created a so-called biography of Harriet Tubman that was more insulting than anything the Florida legislation did. But I will push back on that, because you say the Black slave catchers were worse than white. Yes, but why did you write that way? Because you are coming from an Archibald Dunning, a revisionist mentality that has been taught to you. And to you, that's truthful history. When you write it, that's truthful history, because you don't know any. I said at the beginning of this program, this is not just about Black people. This is about all of us and how we're taught, and how we're taught incorrectly. I agree with you. The Florida curriculum fiasco is just one iota of one issue. But other debates have also opened with state boards who you have politically appointed people who come in here and have trimmed and sanitized topics like the Ku Klux Klan, the Klansman, the book, Birth of a Nation, the Civil Rights Movement, colonialism, to downplay redlining, slave codes, Reconstruction violence. And though you say you see it in our films, you're going to see more of it, because if you're not taught correctly, you don't have a reference. You don't have context. In Texas, there's a controversy a few years ago where a social studies textbook referred to enslaved people as workers or immigrants, and we're still having that debate. Are Black people immigrants? And that would imply that Black folks came over here by choice. And this came from a major publisher, McGraw-Hill, who publishes many of our history books for our kids. But how did that even get approved? It was approved because the Texas Board of Education, which approves a lot of books, approved it. They approved it. They wanted to redress what they said was a bias. They wanted to stop calling it the triangle slave trade and call it the Atlantic triangular trade. Let's take that slave word out. And if you're learning this from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, and this shapes your consciousness, you said I'm in a position. There's no way I believe that white slave masters who hired Black slave catchers. No, and they couldn't have been. No, I'm taking you and listening to what you're saying. And I understand your issues with Hollywood and what's being put out. But I'm letting you know that's a symptom of a deeper disease. And it's heavy. I know that it's real heavy and it's crazy. And you ask yourself, how can anyone justify these changes? And a lot of the rationale comes is we don't want kids to feel guilty. We don't want to emphasize the ways that America failed and wasn't great. And you say you're fighting indoctrination, but you're pushing indoctrination. You say you're fighting divisive concepts, but you're pushing divisive concepts. Let's think about this. If a student is feeling sad, guilty, discomfort, and not feeling good, and grounds to is that grounds to say we don't study history? We teach the Holocaust. We talk about how the quota system affected the Jews to get over here, and many of them died in Europe because countries had put in a quota that would only accept so many. To which the Germans said, they don't want you either. That part of history is pushed aside, but that's a fact. And it wasn't until the civil rights movement and the push of Black folks to get civil rights that those quota systems started to go away, which allowed a lot of the immigrants that you see over here now to come over here without a quota. Do we stop teaching the Holocaust because it makes German kids feel guilty? Should we repeat and allow no one to know about Hitler and what they did? Should we not talk about the internment of the Japanese Americans over here and show how that violated their rights? So if we don't talk about it, then we repeat it. How many people didn't know about the Tulsa race riots? Or should I say the Tulsa race massacre? How many people didn't know about Rosewood? Redlining. How many people didn't realize that a lot of the founding fathers who were talking about the right to liberty were slave owners? It's worth noting that we have to know these things in order to have a context. We have to have a context. I am not aware of the history. Thanks for telling us, because I did not know that that was the basis of the Hart Sellers Act of 1965. It's important to know our legal challenges, our history, what the ACLU, what the NAACP, what people have filed suit against for decades. People are being basically pushed away from history. I don't know if I'm going to get through all of this tonight. There's a lot on my mind that we could talk about. But I will tell you, we are in a fight for historical facts in this era. There are people who want anti-diversity, CRT, whatever they want to call it, whatever their talking points, but basically they want to restrict knowledge to stop not just Black young people, but everybody from learning full story of Americans' past, good and bad. And then we have a fight for scholars and teachers and community leaders to try to find some way to still teach. And this is a struggle that is strong here in 2025. And if we don't face it, we're ignoring the fact that this outcome will shape the next generation's understanding of justice, identity, and progress. And so you got to ask yourself, why does this matter so much? Why are we here, the Erudition Network, dedicating time week after week after week? Why are people literally protesting and suing for the right to teach and learn Black history throughout the country? First, predominantly, Black history is American history. It is world history. It's not a side dish. It's not something that is separate. It is our history that is deeper than just February. It's integral to understanding who we are, how nations were formed, how our world was formed. If you leave Black history out of history, you're getting an inaccurate story. You don't know from the progression of man. You don't understand how man got to where he is right now. Many parts of history mean students are learning a lie by omission. They don't identify who they are. One of my heroes in Black history, Carter G. Woodson, recognized, and this is over 100 years ago, the importance of Black history. So he started what was called Negro History Week in 1926. And this is what later has grown into Black History Month. And he did that because in his time, the contributions of Black people were being ignored, overlooked, usurped. People were lying about where things came from. Facts matter. Woodson, like you're saying, Jabal, understood that the mainstream, the media, the people, historians, they weren't interested in telling real Black history. And he saw it as harmful. He saw it as something negative. Because he realized we're downplaying who we are, and many of us are ashamed of our heritage. But we are integral in the creation of America. We are integral in the success of Europe. And we need to know that. We need to know that. Understanding Black history will allow everyone to grasp the true complexity of who we are. You may say, well, why do I need to know about massacres? Why do I need to know about the Nubians and the people of Kush? And why do I need to know any of that? But it's important. So you understand that people who look like you didn't just show up in a book with chains on. They created inventions, artistic movements, social changes, religious changes. They saved whole nations. But if we tell ourselves that it doesn't matter, then we lose who we are. We got to teach the truth even when it's uncomfortable, because it makes us stronger as a society, as a people, as an entire people. Because the alternate, denying or sugarcoating the mistakes, leaves us to rot. It breeds distrust because people don't understand who contributed. It perpetuates a lie, and it leaves us ill-equipped to deal with what we're dealing with right now. I have these lessons lately. I can't just do it in an hour. So I apologize to you all. We're probably going to split this one again into two, because I haven't got even into some of the things that I want to get into in my notes here. But I want you to think about something. Think about a family, right? With a troubled past. Say they had a parent or someone who was abusive or had an addiction. And we sweep it under the rug and we pretend that everything is just fine, and we don't address the addiction, the abuse, the trouble. It's going to fester. It's going to reappear in later generations. It's going to come up. And people are going to ask the question, well, why did we hide that? But if that family confronted that truth, talked about it, learns about it, heals from it, the history of alcoholism that may have traced through a family, then you will be less likely to pick up a drink, to do a drug, knowing how it may have destroyed one of your ancestors' lives. America has ugly chapters. It has horrible things. But they need to be addressed. And they need to be talked about. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get out of here. I apologize that we did not get through everything that I wanted to get to tonight. But I encourage you to keep watching us. We at the Erudition Network are committed to this cause. We're committed to doing what we're doing. I encourage you to continue this journey. Go look at those books that I mentioned earlier. Grow your knowledge. I want to thank you, all of you for joining us. And just as I said, go out there, get our books, go out there and inquire about what we're doing. Ask your questions on here for next week. We'll get back and we'll get through more of this on why this is important in this era. And hopefully by next week, you will have some more things to say. I know a lot of you all are joining us later. No. I want your comments. It's not just that these programs are for deep thought, but thank you. Next time I'll catch a show, I'll commit. I will not comment so that you can get through the program. No, you asked very, very good questions, and I do appreciate it, Jabel. So please do so. Please do so. Keep learning, keep questioning, keep pushing for a more erudite, which erudition means knowledge, in an equitable world. All right. Thank you for watching and participating. Stay tuned for us next week, and we'll be waiting for you. You all have a blessed rest of your weekend. That's my dogs telling me to sign off. Be blessed. Thank you.